Hey everybody, Dan here from Sci-Fi Models and Stuff, and today I'm going to be showing you something really cool. This is a 1/12 scale T-Rex skeleton from RPM Tech Models. Dinosaurs are badass, and there's a whole subculture of people who only build and paint dinosaur models. A lot of times these guys are really on the forefront of paleontology, and I know at least a few of them are paleontologists themselves, which is really pretty neat. This is an old messy resin kit. And you'll see that I spend a lot more time on the cleaning and construction of the kit than I do on the painting, which is kind of unusual for me. In my original plan, the pelvis was the support piece for the entire skeleton, so I spent a lot of time working on the joints here so I would have a really solid base. I'm pinning using 2-part epoxy and also some epoxy sculpt. Okay, so this is dried overnight, filled in a little bit of putty, ground some down through there. Looks pretty bad now, I don't mind that gap there, but once it's primed up it should be fine. So the next is the spine, I guess the spine that's, upward rib cage part of the spine. Now this is made out of 11 pieces of vertebrae that kind of fit into each other like that. And a few things to note. First, these are all very, very rough castings. I've cleaned this one up a lot, looks okay. But once you get down to some of them that I haven't touched up yet, I mean, they just really look like crap. So that's gonna take a long time to clean up, that's fine. I'm still working on the pose that I want this dinosaur to be in. And the pose that they have for just gluing it together would be a straight back. And I don't think I want to do that. I think I want some kind of curve in there, some kind of life. So what I've done is I've drilled a hole through the middle of each of these, drilled a corresponding hole here, and attaching some aluminum wire into that. This wire's a little bit flimsy. It is a hollow tube. So eventually I'll go through and replace that maybe with a solid brass tube or something that can hold the weight a little better. And after that, you just slide the vertebrae down. It's actually really satisfying to see this come together. Okay, they really line up pretty nicely. Again, it's going to take some work, but by having this wire, it gives me the flexibility to kind of move things around. You'll notice that some of the ribs are bent or curved. So what I'm going to do next is fix those. What I'm going to do is I'm going to boil some water, let the resin sit in there for a little bit, and then bend them a little bit straighter. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll clean these up, and we'll be back to you then. Okay, I've test fit this brass rod into the pelvis area, and it fits well. So now I'm filling up this hole with some 2-part epoxy, and making sure there's a pretty good amount in there. We really want this to be bulletproof. Okay, it's probably good. And we are just gonna stick that in there, and we're kind of teasing it out to make sure that epoxy is spread down the length. And there we go. This is gonna be able to bend, probably with the help of some pliers, and that will be very strong. And you can support the whole weight of it on the end here, so. Tail comes in 4 pieces, which is kind of a pain. And to really make the sculpt come to life, we're going to need to bend this into some kind of shape. I'm not really sure the best way to do that yet, but to start, I'm going to be pinning these 2 sections together very similarly to how we did the ribs. I'm going to drill a hole there, apply some epoxy, and tight bottom there. Now, unfortunately, I lost the footage that I took when I was bending the tail, but it's pretty easy to explain. When you heat up resin, you're able to bend it. I like to use boiling water because it applies a nice even heat all over the part. The tail piece is super long, so I used my wife's stock pot to boil it. I made a nice gentle bend through the tail to kind of give a sense of movement. Okay, so this wire in the pelvis is dried. What I've done is I've given it kind of a slight bend. Just a side note, we want the dinosaur to be kind of turning left. So I made it kind of gently match the curve of the tail, and when we put the ribs on, the whole rib cage will turn too, so it'll be cool. By the time I'm done, I estimate the rib cage will be about 50% putty. Okay, we're making good progress. We have the tail pretty much done, a good head start on the ribs, and really the last bit, major bit, is the skull. This is the worst cast piece out of the bunch. I've already spent a good hour or so cleaning up some of the holes, but as you can see, there's still a long, long way to go. And same here. One of the problems with this kit is that there's really no joint on the jaw. As you can see, that really just has no place to go. So it's going to take some work. Notice that casting line right there, all the holes, and that's not to mention the teeth, which are going to take time. I'm going to probably have to file each of those individually. Got the same problem on the lower jaw. Now, normally I would use epoxy putty or another two-part epoxy putty to fill up some of these holes because it doesn't shrink. And really it would only take one application. However, weight is going to be a serious concern here. There's going to be a lot of leverage on this head, so I don't want to add any additional weight to it. So as a result, I am using a single one-part putty. This is Bondo glazing and spotting putty, and it shrinks a fair amount. So we're probably going to have to do this numerous times, but basically right now I'm running over everything with it. We're going to try and sand it down and reduce some of these steps and gaps. So one thing you may have noticed is that I got done with the last vertebrae, but of course that doesn't connect to the head. There's a whole neck involved, and the neck is made out of about 10 more vertebrae pieces. These are quite a bit smaller than our ribs, and a lot of them have some extra rib parts that come down that we'll get to later. So for these, they kind of make a little bit of an S shape. There's some natural curve in there, which is cool. But just like the ribs, we want to be able to adjust that to the left and to the right. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to drill holes through the middle of all of them, and we'll be able to shape that onto our neck. Okay, so we got all the vertebrae attached, and we got the head as well. Still got to work on the posing of the head a little bit, but I think it's about where I want it. The last step of this will be to add the little neck ribs that go all the way down. But I'm going to wait on those because they're pretty fragile. When it comes to the legs, that's going to be the main support piece for the skeleton. I've seen a couple builds where somebody put a rod coming right through the pelvis that holds it up, and I don't want to do that. I want it to be as freestanding as possible. So what I'm going to try to do is to drill a hole through the middle of the fibia, I believe, and the femur. So the idea is to drill right through there, run a brass rod through the entire piece into here, and then I can have some flexibility too on how I pose that. but it'll be a single piece of brass going through it, which will then hold the body up. This is going to be very difficult, I think, because you can see that there's really no good flat spots for this drill bit to catch, and it's really pretty narrow. So I'm a little bit nervous, but we're going to try doing that, and I guess we'll do it right now. Later, the foot goes down like this, and I think what I'll do is I'll have the brass coming out of the leg, and then the foot kind of balanced on the toes. Okay, and that actually worked better than I could have ever asked. Came out smooth on that end and smooth there. I was actually really worried about that. So that's great. Here, we're gonna do the same with the femur. It should end up right about there, I think. I'm gonna have to check my references, but once it's actually pinned, it'll sit off a little bit and that'll give me some room to kind of pose it. Really pretty cool. I've never had to use a long drill bit before, so. Okay, so the femur sits into the pelvis on that joint right here. Now there is a nice convenient hole marked to pin through there. And what I want to do eventually is to run wire through the entire femur and out that joint and then into here. So it'll be one long pin that curves out down the femur, down the tibia, fibia, whatever, into the leg. So for that, I'm gonna have to drill a vertical hole basically to about there, and then drill a hole through there that connects to it. This is gonna be difficult. In fact, it might be easier to drill all the way through and then drill a little side tunnel and then cover that hole up. That's actually, now that I think about it, probably gonna be the easiest way to do it. So, wish me luck. Okay, and there we go. I kind of had to hollow out a trench there so I could bend it, but it's got enough, hopefully, extra room there to lock into the pelvis. Now that that's on, this goes something like that, not quite, and then I'll bend it to where I want. That's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with this. So, we've got basically the main torso done here. The next step is going to be finalizing the position of the legs. I've got the first one here. And it's really hard to tell from this angle, but this is coming together pretty nicely. It's starting to look good. This needs to be worked on a little bit to get the posing right. And also I'll talk about how I'm going to connect that to the body so that it's nice and stable to hold the weight of this entire thing. So I'm going to work on that a little bit. And once we get those in the final poses that we like, I'll see you back. So one of the problems I'm finding is when you insert this brass rod into the hole, it spins freely. Normally wouldn't matter so much, but with a heavy model like this, it's going to droop. And we're basically going to be playing a balancing act. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is I've cut off some square brass tubing here. Come on. I'm going to epoxy that on here. This particular diameter is 5/32. Fits right over the 1/8" brass rod. Then I'll put a corresponding square, slightly larger at 3/16 into the body. This will telescope in there, and then it won't be able to spin. So that'll give us some stability. So I'm just going to epoxy this on right now, make sure that we got a good snug fit there, and I'll show you how to put the other side in a minute. Okay, so I got my square tube here. This is 3/16 inch. On the last segment, I glued a different square tube onto there, and you'll see that it fits very snugly. It's actually almost too tight where you really gotta pay attention. All right, it's in there, and once it's in there, it can't bend, it can't turn at all. So just wanted to show that again. Next thing we're gonna do is drill a hole here, cut off a length of this tube, and glue it in there. Okay, so we got our legs. I was able to fully assemble almost everything and get it standing on a base. And one thing I noticed was that the body tended to rotate on this. It wasn't strong enough to hold it. And a big part of that is this square tube that's basically glued onto a round tube. There's room in there for it to turn. So not good. I tried all bunches of things over the last couple days. I've done JB weld, I've tried solder, I've tried different types of epoxies. Nothing seems to be strong enough. So just now, I included a second pin, very similar to what we did on like the tail. And I'm hoping that between the two, that'll stop it from rotating and allow it to hold the weight. We're gonna let that dry a little bit, and then we'll give it a shot. Here's a fun little piece. I got 18 separate ribs. I think they're called cervical ribs that go onto the neck vertebrae. And this is the worst part cast of the bunch. As you can see, it is just a solid little paper thin sheet of resin. I'm gonna have to carve these out. Okay, so I have all those glued on, and surprisingly it wasn't that difficult, and took me, I don't know, about an hour. They all glued on very well, and what's nice is they actually add quite a bit to the model. They just add some nice details. Okay, just a few sections left, and luckily I think they're all fairly simple. So all we have left to do are the arms and the hands, or I'm sorry, the arms and the feet and toes. Arms are pretty easy. There's two pieces. There's a shoulder blade and then an arm. That can just be glued in. There's no stress on that, and it glues right into the rib cage. So I'm not even going to show you that. The toes, made up of 4 pieces. There's the feet, or I guess the foot bone, and toes go at various angles. Until we had it standing, it was really kind of difficult to determine what these angles would be, but I think I've got them figured out. So basically gonna go like that. I'm gonna pin it so that it can hold some weight and help support a little bit. So I'm gonna get those on and be back then. Now the skull's really the last piece. And you can see here I've glued the jaw on. Still need a lot of cleanup around here and on the inside. But I'm really kind of getting anxious to see how this looks. So we're gonna glue it for now and see what happens. Now really just that coat of primer makes it really good. And there aren't as many issues as I kind of thought there would be. But what I'm going to do next is go once over with some putty and just kind of add some different textures, fill up any major holes, anything like that. Last once over, and we'll prime that black when we're done. Okay, so I got the final coat of primer done, so we're all in black here. Now I'm going to start painting it up to look kind of like bone. So I'm using this reference image, and I mixed up some paint. to kind of replicate that effect. So here we go. Now it's very difficult to get good lighting on this because it's so big. But there's kind of what we did. Gave it some nice gray and yellow overtones. Okay, so that's looking really good. Next thing I'm going to do, and I'm not sure if this is the right order to do it in, but I'm going to add some pigments on here to give it more detail on the texture. So I'm just kind of dabbing around. I've got a few colors mixed up. And really just kind of spreading around there. Adding a little bit more colorized texture to the texture that's already there. Okay, so pigments have dried overnight, and it's looking a little bit lighter than I would want in some areas. So I've mixed up a very dark wash, basically black and brown oil. And there you have it, the finished product. Some areas, kind of make some contrast and make it look a little better. Now, as much as I love this kit, it's honestly a little bit too big for my house, so it's going up for sale. So if you can fit this in your house and you're interested, I put a link in the description that you can check out below. All right, as always, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.